Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, December. Oh, I forgot to check the date. It's early December. It's like the 4th, 5th, maybe, 2018. And let me just make sure that I'm online. It's the 5th. Okay. And I apologize for the late start. I'm, well, we are really hard at work. We are hard at work putting putting MuseScore 3 together, and that was the topic of last week's cafe. So this week I want to get back to talking about music, and yes, I do have sound. Okay, so I had done this reharmonization of Silent Night. Looks like a couple of years ago, and posted it here on MuseScore.com. Along with an article on what I did, but I want to kind of walk through this a little bit more here. So first of all, this here is the link to the score itself. So let me, oh, yes, I am live. That's a nice notification. Okay. Talk out my chat. So this here is a link to the score. And let's get back to my MuseScore get back to this window. Sorry about that. So here is the music, and as you can see, I have a very, very, very simplified rendition of this as far as the actual chords go. And what I'm going to do is show you, first of all, I'm going to put in a really simple, basic playback on it, not by even using the fancy thing that I did in the cafe a while back. That's actually going to be overkill. Let me put this in MuseScore 2 scores, because I'm going to do this in MuseScore 2 just to... I almost wanted to do it in MuseScore 3, but just in case I run into some sort of bug that gets in the way, I didn't want that to mess things up. Okay, so I've downloaded this score, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this score. And we're going to take a look at what I've done with it. Let's go full screen and page. Whoops, I always do that. Page width. Okay, so it's an extremely simple harmonization that really just involves 3 chords: the 1 chord, the 5 chord, and the 4 chord occasionally. I kind of interrupted myself a minute ago. What I want to talk about is that I'm really going to create just the most simple realization of this harmony as part of what we're going to do today. And then next week, I plan to talk about actually arranging this either for piano or a choral group, perhaps, depending on where we go with it. So in the original, I have if you download the document, you'll see page 1 is the super simple version, and then I go right on to a fairly complex reharmonization right off the bat, and then another equally, maybe slightly more complex harmonization. And there is a document, if you look at the comments here, there's a document that you can read where I actually talk about how I went about doing this, but it's designed for maybe people who have already taken one of my classes and know the language that I speak. I mean, I do try to explain things as much as I can. So let me get this link also in the chat. Here we go. Where was I going? Oh, yeah, that's it. the harmonization and the way I describe it is very much keyed into the way that I teach about harmony. And I should mention, this is something now that I plan to do once we have MuseScore 3 out the door and behind us, and all dust is settled, and I have my book updated and all that. I want to start putting out courses to teach music also, kind of along the lines of what I'm doing here, teaching music, but in the context of MuseScore, so that people who are interested in creating music with MuseScore can learn the theory and so forth. So the sort of things that we're looking at right now are the kinds of things that I'm eventually going to offer an online course for, and you're getting a taste of it here. So what happened? Am I still online? My phone stopped tracking what I was doing. I hope I'm still online. Let me just check. Make sure it says I'm still broadcasting. It says I'm still broadcasting. I'm going to assume that I'm still good. Give me a moment, because I do want to be able to check so I'm not talking to myself for no good reason. All right. All right, I am following again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just take this original version here, and I'm going to go do a couple of things. I'm going to first add some staves to it. And I did remember to turn on my, there we go. I'm going to add a piano to this. And that is so that I'm going to just add a whole new piano. And that's so I can just put in some really basic things here. I'm just going to put in the roots of the chords. And let's turn up the volume. I think 32 is where I've been doing it to get a pleasing mix. And then G. All right, this is like, crazy simple. All I'm gonna hear is melody and roots. But let's just do that. All right, I'm not going to play through the whole thing. We know how that song goes, and it's very, very simple. I'll play it once we actually start doing something to it. Just by having the melody and the roots, we can hear something about the harmony already. And it especially helps that the melody note here is very often going to be the third of the chord, which really helps fill it in. The places where the melody note is the fifth of the chord, that's all well and good, but the fifth is actually not as useful for really establishing the sound of the chord as the root is. Okay, and this just stopped again. I sure hope that you guys are able to still be following this. That would be really nice if it's still working. Well, if not, I'll redo this. If nothing else, hopefully it's recording. Checking. Live chat. Well, I'm going to hope that the chat's there. Not showing on my phone anymore. Let me pop over here. Okay, if anyone encounters problems, just let me know. There's a few of you watching live. As I said, the third of the chord is often in the melody, like here. So that helps establish the sound of the chord. And here again. So if I really wanted to fill in anything else here, what I would really do is fill in missing thirds. So I might put in the missing third there, and then maybe go to the root here, the missing third here, the root, and then the missing third here, and it looks like here I'm missing a fifth. So what I am relying on is that I know these triads backwards and forwards, and if I have two notes I have a melody note and a bass note, I can just look at it and tell which note is missing, the root, third, or fifth. And the root's never going to be the missing one because I put the roots in at the bottom. The only place I didn't is here, where the chord itself called for an alternate bass note. So root could be a potential note to put in this staff, except the root is actually in the melody. Again, I'm putting in the fifth there. I want thirds where possible. And then here I'm missing a fifth. And then I'm missing a third, but not really. I'm not really missing a third because I'm going to get at the end of the measure. So I'm just going to maybe repeat the root and then put the third there and then back. So anyhow, let's hear a little bit about what this sounds like now, where I basically just filled in missing thirds, occasionally missing fifth. Alright, so I can see actually that I didn't really like this sound here, where I didn't get to hear the third until later. Boy, I am just a real stickler for being able to hear thirds. So I think I'm just going to raise that to the third right there. It's a big leap in this voice, but whatever. We're gonna work on the actual arrangement aspect of it next time. I'm really just looking at the harmonization right now. Okay, so what we have now is the structure that we're going to start from to do just a bit of reharmonization now. So this is where I said that that document that I wrote up really expects that you know a certain few things about how things work. And I do try to explain it, but it's a real quick explanation. So I want to try to explain it in maybe different words now. The basic idea is I like to break up a song into individual phrases where like the start of each phrase is what I call a target point. At least that's what I called it in that document, I remember. So the beginning here, we have our one chord. This first phrase is 4 bars long. All the rest of the phrases are 2 bars long, and that's where the chord changes. I'm not saying every time the chord changes is necessarily a new phrase. In fact, normally it's not. But that's how I set up this one. I set this one up with the world's simplest harmonization. And if you have a harmonization that is that simple, then yeah, every chord change will indicate a new phrase pretty much. But most of them aren't going to be this simple. So I have this phrase that's based on the 1 chord. This phrase is based on the 5. This phrase is based on the 1. This based on the 4, that based on the 1, etc. And what I want to do is I'm going to look at each phrase individually and reharmonize it in a way that's designed to lead nicely into the next phrase. So the most important thing to know about what it means to lead nicely is 5 likes to go to 1. Here we have a 5 chord going to 1. You can't really improve on that. But I could certainly do other things here at the beginning of the phrase and just make sure I have that G7 towards the end, and that's actually what I'm going to be doing. Here, 4 also likes to go to 1, so I'm going to be perfectly happy with that, but again, I might do other things here, or I might try changing it to 5. But this is what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at changing each phrase in a way that still leads where it needs to go. But before I do that, I want to actually look at the first chords of my targets and establish a little rule that I want to lay on you here. And it goes like this. If you have a chord that has 3 notes in it and you leave off the root, my own screen, all right, chord with 3 notes in it, leave off the root, you get the beginnings of another chord. In other words, here's C, E, G. If you leave off the C, you now have E, G. And if you put another note in there, B, you have another chord that's got 2 of those same notes in it. C, E, G, E, G, B. The 1 chord and the 3 chord have those 2 notes in common. And that's really important because it really means these chords substitute for each other well. Also, A minor, A, C, E. Leave off the A, you get C and E. So A minor, and C major also have two notes in common. So that those pairs kind of substitute for each other. In place of a one chord, you can use 3 or 6. And then in place of the 4 chord, you can use 2. This is the normal substitute that I would use there. D, F, A is a D minor chord. Leave off the D, you have F, A, and then tag on a C, and you've got an F chord. So 2 and 4 substitute for each other. And then 5 and 7, G, B, D, leave off the G, you have B, D, add an F, you get a B diminished chord. That's maybe not as useful. But here's the other thing. So anyhow, let's not do the other thing. What I would say is I can take any of these C chords and replace them with either E minor chords or A minor chords as I see fit. And I will do this in part based on the melody. Like here, the melody note is C. C isn't going to fit my E minor chord so well, but does fit an A minor chord. So if I wanted to reharmonize this measure with something other than C, I would probably choose A minor. That's bar 7. Did I do that? I did that in this reharmonization, and I did it in that reharmonization. Yeah, it's a pretty good choice. Let's go ahead and do that. A minor. And so I will change this note to that, and change this note to the 3rd. So what I've done is I've changed that 1 chord to a 6 chord. What I might also do is change this chord to the 2 chord. And then I am now missing its 3rd. Whoops. And this time I'll just repeat. All right. So that's the sort of change you can do, just replacing 1s with 3s every once in a while, and replacing 1s with 6s every once in a while, replacing 2s with 4s every once in a while. If you look, well, yeah, you see that's what I did here. So I replaced that 1 chord with a 6 chord. I left this 4 chord alone. I left that 4 chord alone. But this 1 chord over here, that was a 1 chord there in bar 15. This 1 chord here I replaced with 3. This 1 chord here in bar 19, it looks like I replaced with 6, again because that C was in the melody, and I did that for both of my reharmonizations. So that type of reharmonization, replacing chords with other chords that have 2 notes in common, that's kind of a starting place, because now this gives you new avenues. I said you can't really improve on G7 as a way of getting to C, but now if I'm trying to get to A minor, I can do all sorts of other things to get to that A minor. So that's the kind of thing that we would want to be doing in this reharmonization, is looking at replacing our target points and then look at replacing the phrases that lead to them. So I need to mention the one other thing that I didn't mention before, and that is what to do about this 5 chord. I don't actually like starting a phrase with the 5 chord because I don't have a lot of good ways of creating phrases that lead naturally into phrases beginning with 5. Yes, there's chords that do that, secondary dominants do that, but it's not typically how the music in the kind of genre that I am reharmonizing in, kind of the American popular song genre, the genre of Broadway show tunes of the first half of the century of really most popular music. We don't have that kind of thing. What we do instead of having a whole phrase based on the 5 is, what I like to tell my students is anything 5 can do, 2/5 can do better. 2 leads to 5 by the circle of fifths, and also it gives me some variety here. So I have 2/5 now. So I could actually just go back. In fact, let me just do that. Let me keep this back to my original C. Let's just select both these guys. and transpose them up. Shift Alt up. Okay. So that is one of the things that I did in my reharmonizations was I replaced that 5 with a 2-5. I at least did that somewhere. You can see here I replaced it with the D minor. Here I did something else more complicated, so I'll have to get to that, and probably won't, because I'm not going to create the world's most complicated reharmonization here. I'm just going to create one that I think kind of sounds nice. So let's go ahead and fix this. I want my root D, and I'll want my third here. And since my third is already covered here, I'm just going to keep that F here, and now it's a 7th. What I'm trying to do in this line is just create something that helps fill out the chord. So let's see what I have at this point. I forgot that I changed that to A minor. I'm going to take a look at these first 4 bars here. What I'm now looking at is, boy, if I want to get to this D minor, is there another way of getting to that D minor? And yeah, there's lots of great ways of getting to a D minor chord, getting to the 2 chord. Okay. Basically, the most important thing to know is that if you want to reach a chord, giving that chord its own 2-5 is the way to do it. So if I want to reach a D minor chord, I ask myself, if I was a D minor chord, if this was the 1 chord, if I was in the key of D minor, what does the 2 and the 5 look like? The answer is the 2 chord would be an E minor, probably an E half diminished, and the 5 chord would be A7. And now I want to look at the melody and see if it works with that. And it does. E minor or E half diminish is going to work great with that measure. And A, or in particular A7, we want it to be a dominant 7th 2-5. So dominant 7th 5 here. In the key of D minor, the 5 chord A7. E is going to work beautifully with that. So if I make this be an E minor 7, and then this be an A7, I'm going to get leading to that D minor very nicely. So let me go ahead and make these changes. To fill out my A chord here, I need a C sharp, that's the 3rd. Here, I have the root, I have the 3rd. I don't really need anything else in particular, but I'll go ahead and put the 5th in there so then I can decide if I really want E minor or if I want E half diminished. Basically, that comes down to whether this is a B natural or a B flat. Let's hear what this sounds like. All right, so now this is starting to sound like the kind of language that I am trying to write in here. There's plenty more I can do voice leading wise with how I'm writing that accompaniment. Again, that's what I want to talk about next time. But what you can see is by changing my target point here and then creating a nice approach to that target point, I was able to create a chord progression that makes a lot of logical sense and sounds good. Let me just quickly continue on this track. At this point, I have a phrase that's basically 4 bars long, and nothing happens in this bar. I don't like that, having nothing happen. I'm going to have something in every bar. And here I'm just going to appeal to the fact that there's nothing that necessarily needs to happen in this measure. I just need a chord that is stable, that won't mess up the flow. So there's a number of things I could do to have a stable chord here, a chord that's just sort of takes space, sounds nice, but doesn't derail the train. What we're looking for is the harmonic equivalent of an inert gas. Those of you who've ever studied chemistry, or if you know anything about light bulbs, they're filled with tungsten? No, tungsten's what the filament's made of. They're filled with some sort of gas that doesn't catch fire. So, and doesn't react. So I don't know why I'm talking about chemistry. I should be talking about music. I want a chord here that doesn't do anything. It just sits there. Basically, our magic chord for that is going to be 4. All the other chords, the 1 chord, all motion stops when you get to a 1 chord. That's like, yeah, the 1 chord doesn't need to go anywhere. All the other chords tend to want to go down the circle of fifths. 3 wants to go to 6. 6 wants to go to 2. 2 wants to go to 5. 4 doesn't need to go anywhere. So I am going to try a 4 chord right here. It's the melody note is the major 7th, which is fine by me as a jazz musician. I am fine with major 7ths. So I'm going to go with that, and then I will make sure I have a 3rd covered here. And that gives me a chord to place there. Let's hear that. Okay, so again, I forgot to do anything with this 6th chord, but did you hear how that 4 chord sounded? It's kind of nice. Let me just play the first couple measures again. Right, so that's the sound of that 4 chord there. So this, I put a 6th chord here, and I made it a minor chord because originally it was 2 bars I had of that, but if I'm trying to reach a D minor chord here, I don't want an A minor. I want an A major chord. In fact, I really want A7. And this is the 7th. So let's hear what that phrase sounds like. Because A7 leads to D minor. That's the 5 chord in the key of D minor. So that's what that sounds like. Now, I'm not crazy about this, and it's because I've just repeated myself. I had this A7 going to D minor here, and I have A7 going to D minor there. Not crazy about it. I think I actually want to go back to the F chord that I started with. I think the F chord is going to make me happier, and I think not only that, but it's going to give me an opportunity to do something better here. Now that I'm trying to get to the F, again, I want to put in a 2-5 in the key of F. Or maybe since there's only a measure here, I'm not going to try to make this too complicated. I'm just going to put in the 5 in the key of F. The 5 in the key of F is C7. So I'm going to go back to C, but this time make it a C7 chord. Now the C7 chord, I say C7, but boy, the 7th itself is not happening here. So I think I'm going to have to add that and just use another note to do it. And then it's going to bother me to have that 7th not resolve, so I'm going to go ahead and add the resolution here to A. This 7th of the C7 is going to resolve to that A here, even though it's a doubled note. So let's hear what this sounds like starting at this point. So there you have it. Oh yeah, and then I still had that D minor chord in there, which is fine. So this process is really how I got to what you have here. And in fact, what you can see here is quite similar. Here's my 1, 4, 3, 6, 2. But then I did something else here. Instead of a 5 chord, I put in some other chords because I was trying to get to A minor. You'll notice that I actually undid that A minor thing. I went back to C here. And that's fine. But if I had wanted to get to A minor, then there's other ways of treating this chord instead of the G7. So let's take a look at that. If I want an A minor here, let's go to A. Now I ask myself, how do you get to A minor? Again, the answer is, well, a 2-5 in the key of A minor. Or since I'm keeping this a little on the simpler side and there's only one measure, I'm going to make it just the 5. That's E7. So I'm going to make this an E. And then this will be G sharp. I'm looking at what octave I want this in. It'll work to put it in that octave. And now, in this case, since I've got my root and my third, and I have this G sharp, I kind of want that G sharp to resolve there. So let's hear how this sounds like now. So here, oh, anyhow, I have the E7 is leading me to that A minor. Now it's not quite so, you know, I had a C followed by C7. That's fine, but this is going to be that much more interesting. So that's just the first line of the tune. I could spend a lot of time continuing to tweak things about this line, but what you'll see is I'm actually now at this point quite close to this harmonization. The only thing that's different is I actually did do something in there and I did some stuff in here. But that involved having to have 2 chords per measure, and I think I'm going to go with a slightly simpler harmonization that doesn't require 2 chords per measure. So I have, I've reached my F chord, and now I'm looking, I want to get to a C chord. Yes, I could hang on F for 2 bars, but I mentioned that 5 really likes to go to 1 also. I could keep the F, there's nothing wrong with it, but I kind of want to put a 5 chord here, a G chord. I look at this melody note, C, and say, well, that's the 4th of the chord. We usually like to avoid the 4th in the melody, but that's okay. If I call it a sus chord, then it's actually fine. So I'm going to call that G7 sus, and I will be fine with it. So G7 now leads me to that C. The other thing, though, that I could have done is said, well, instead of this C chord, I could have decided to change that to E minor or A minor. I think I'm not. I think I'm going to let it come to C here because I haven't actually come back to just a plain C chord in this whole song yet, right? I've got this C chord, and then I'm doing all these other things. I have this C, but it's a C7. It's a moving C. It's not diatonic. It's going somewhere. So this is the first time I've actually returned to the 1 chord. And I don't like to return to the 1 chord too often, but that's fine. I'll turn to it here. But maybe in this passage I'll do other things, like I like to look ahead. This G7, I know right away I don't want 2 bars of G7. I'm going to want D minor 7, G7. I know that. Or at least I want the D minor there. And then what this is going to tell me here is, just as was the case here, to get to that D minor, I'm going to want an E minor A7. So this is going to become E minor 7, A7, 2-5 in the key of D minor. And that possibly gives me new things to do here as well. So I'm kind of thinking ahead so that I can work backwards. I kind of want to try something that I remember having tried before. I don't remember how well I liked it, but we're going to try it anyhow. Let's say I want to reach E minor and say, well, give him his own 2-5. That's going to be F sharp minor, or F sharp half diminished, to B7. And boy, I look at that and say, F sharp minor or F sharp half diminished, that's going to work pretty well right there. B7 is going to work pretty well right here. I kind of want to try that. It's a little unexpected to actually replace this 4 chord F with an F sharp half diminished. I could keep the F and then squeeze that little 2-5 into here, but I kind of want to try it. So I'm going to try that. Let's leave the chord symbol alone. Let's just change the voicing. This is going to be boom, F sharp to B to E to A. And now I want to fill in the missing note here, which is going to be C is the missing 5th, And this is just a diminished triad now, F sharp, A, and C. In order to be half diminished, I really want the E also. And now here, I want the B7 sound, so I need a D sharp. And then here, I want the 7th of that E. I want a D natural. And then here, I'm going to want a C sharp, the 3rd of that chord. So this is actually a really nice little melodic line being created here. So we'll see how well I like that. Let me put the chord symbols in so you can see what I'm talking about. F sharp, I'll use the half diminished symbol. I don't actually use it much myself. I usually write minor 7 flat 5, but that's kind of jazz speak. All right, B7 flat 9, because that's what this melody note is. I don't have a good way to reach a half diminished chord, so I think I'm just going to let this be the C chord. Although I feel like getting from C to F sharp by way of A minor could make sense. It's C to A to F sharp, right? That as a bass line, that's pretty nice. So I'm just going to try that and make my A minor here. All right, so I have a C chord, C, E, G. I have my A minor chord, A, C, E. I kind of want to hear this phrase now. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I do kind of like that. That's the jazzer in me, maybe, but all of this is a little jazzy, but it's not. It's funny because jazz musicians claim to own this language, or we talk about this being a jazzy language, but it's not. This is the language of, this is Broadway. This is popular music of the first half of the 20th century. This is the music that Frank Sinatra sang. This is the music that anyone who was a popular singer in the first half of the 20th century did this kind of harmonizations in their music. The composers who wrote for the Broadway shows, for the movies, and all the popular music of that, this is the harmonizations that they used. Jazz musicians just really have taken this into the present day. All right, so I've got that A7 going to D minor. I need to actually make that be a D. And then I have a G. Let's fill in the rest of my chord here. Oops. W to lengthen it to a half note. Shift W to add a dot, for those of you keeping score. And then I have the 3rd in this chord, but not until later in the measure. I've already learned my lesson. I didn't like that. I wanted to hear the 3rd the whole time. So that would do this. However, I kind of feel like I want to talk about the ending, because I'm actually thinking of not using this G7 chord here at all. I'll tell you what I'm thinking. This last 2 measures really is like a 1, 5, 1, but the 1 chord is usually placed in second inversion here. And if you've studied theory, you may know that this chord is really functioning as a dominant chord. Even though it's a 1 chord, it's a C chord, it's in some ways just a fancy 5 chord. I don't even know how to explain that better. I do know how to explain it, but I'm not going to right now. At some level, this is all about the 5 chord. So what I could do is treat it as such and think, well, what's a way of getting to the 5 chord? And again, I'm going to ask myself, in the key of G, what's the 5 chord? And the answer is D7. So I think I want to put a D7 chord here. D7 is designed to lead to the G, and so I will make this be a D. And I'll put my F sharp here. And then I'll fill out my chord here. I went ahead and let the song end with just the root here. I didn't worry about the missing third. I'll worry about that when I do the full arrangement. So what I've done here is I've added this D7 because I know I like that sound. We've all heard this song before. If you've played it before, you've probably heard or played versions that actually use this harmonization here. It's going to be very pretty when we hear it. In fact, let's just hear it the way it is, and then I'm going to make one final change. Okay. So I'm really almost to the point where I want to be. I've made this D7. What's actually very commonly done is to put this F sharp in the bass and make this be a sort of a somewhat darker chord. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do that because I'm not interested in like totally reinventing the wheel here. If there's a reharmonization that other people have done that sounds good, I'm fine with it. So I'm going to put this as an A, I think. Yeah. The other note that I could have in here is a C also here. So let me add a C. So because that fills it out and actually makes this. Oh, what I should do is tell you it's a D, because then it's a D7, right? It's a D7, but this is actually the ninth. What I was really going to do is make this be the C, and so this isn't actually a D7 anymore. It's F sharp half diminished again, but this time it's really just D7 missing the root. It's not, this F sharp diminished is there because it's the 2 of this 2-5-1. This F sharp diminished would be just substituting for D7. So we're putting substitution on top of substitution. I'm just going to call it D7 and be good. So I said that I kind of wanted to maybe replace this C. I don't want to give away the C too much. There's a whole lot of C in this last line here. So I really want to take advantage of that ability to substitute an A minor here. So I'm going to go with, an A minor there. And that also gives me A minor to D7, which is circle of fifths. Circle of fifths is always going to be satisfying. And so here's my A minor, there's my D7. And so now instead of a G7 here, I could do the same thing that I did there of use E7 to get to that. But maybe what I want to do is save the E7 for here and use just the G7 there. What do you think? I think I'm going to try that here. Let's see what this sounds like. Let's hear it the first way. All right, now I'm going to hear this guy the way I have it. All right, that's how that sounds. Let me change this one to E and make this B, the G sharp. I really like that one, to be honest. So I think I'm going to use the E7 here, and I'm going to come back and just use G7 here. I don't want to necessarily beat people over the head with the fancy stuff too soon. I'm trying to click the E. I'm a little too small right now. Let me zoom in. There we go. All right. All right, and here, just from a voice leading perspective, I've got two A's. There we go. F leading to E. I'm happier. All right. So we've heard every little bit of this piece now. Okay. The only thing I want to do before we play the whole piece is just say, well, instead of just landing right on the C chord, I want to put in a little bit of a cliche, which is making this into a little 4-to-1. This 5 is really perfectly happy just going directly to 1, but there's just something nice about deciding to put in a 4 chord first and then the 1. It's a kind of a cliche ending for something if you want it to sound slightly, I don't know, gospel-y or something. So what I'm going to do is fill out the chord that way. Right? And now at this point, I think I'll let that be the missing third. So, as I said, this is a bit of a cliche ending, but I like it. So there's certain things that I've borrowed from things I've heard before. I've heard that used before. I've heard that used before. A lot of the other things that I've done, though, everyone probably uses that C7 in their harmonizations of this. If they're not playing it just totally with 3 chords, then this is probably one of the first chords anyone would ever add. Let's do a quick check and make sure that I didn't leave anything half done, and then we're going to hear the thing. And then next week we're going to actually try to turn this into a fuller arrangement. So there's my A7, D minor, G7. Actually, I think after I play this, I'm just going to add one more voice because I've got 2 voices in some places, and I do think I can improve the voice leading. Let's play it. Oh yeah, I was finished going through it. G7, C, A minor, F sharp diminished, B, D minor, A7, D, E, A minor, A2. Okay, that all looks good. Let's hear it. It's going to sound pretty decent already. Okay. I'm thinking the end of Let It Be. Well, not even the end of each phrase. Right, that's kind of one of the places where that cliche gets used. I wasn't crazy about this little section here. Let me just hear this one more time. All right, I think I know what I want to do. I said I wanted to keep it simple and only have 1 chord per measure, but I do feel like having an actual 2-5 in this would make me happier instead of just the G7. So I'm going to go with a D minor 7. I think I'm just going to change midstream. I think I'm just going to put the G7 right over the middle of the measure. And so that's really that's going to be a dotted quarter note of the D, and then another dotted quarter of a G. Okay. And now at this point, that also lets me put the 3rd in on that chord. So I'm going to make this be a dotted quarter and then put my 3rd in there. Let's see if I like this better. All right, so I didn't really need this B here because it's covered in there and I didn't like the jump. I'm just going to leave that B an F for now. We're going to deal with this all next week. Yeah, I think I like that better. Okay, so almost done. I think what I want to do, though, is add a 3rd voice here. It's really a fourth voice, right? We have our melody, we have our bass, we have an inner voice that occasionally splits in two. I just want to fill this out a little bit. So I'm going to take a look at all my triads, and if there's a missing note, I'm going to add it. I'm going to pick a note to double. If there's an interesting color note, I'm going to add that. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to add here, I think, just another C. So it often comes up that we want to add notes below where we are, and there's not a shortcut for that. Someday, it would be nice if there was. I would absolutely agree, and we'll probably add one. There used to be one to add intervals below, like add a third below, but it conflicted with some shortcuts on French keyboards. Anyhow, what I'm doing is I'm just pressing Shift and letter name. Like here, I want to add a C, so I add the C. Oops, forgot to move the cursor. Here we go, C. And now, if I need to change the octave, I'll just hit Control down. So now here, E, G, B. I've got a triad, E, G, B, but I could add my seventh, D. To this chord, I have the A, C sharp, and E that make up the triad. I'm missing a seventh, so I could add the seventh, G, and I think I will. I say I could. I'm hedging because I know I really would love a flat 9 on this thing also, a B flat. In fact, let me move ahead to the next chord and think about this for a second. What I'm missing here is I've got two roots. The melody and the bass are both the root. So I'm missing both the C and the A. That would make up a D minor 7. I said D minor, but it's really D minor 7 that I want. So I think I really want the C here. And I'm going to put it down there. So this C sharp is going to lead to that C. I really need a note somewhere around here to lead to that F, and the answer is it's going to be the G. Okay. In my harmonization, I can add a B flat if I want to have that flat 9. All right. Here, I'm missing the D. Here, I've got a root, a third, and a fifth. I don't really need a seventh because this chord's not resolving down a third or anything. I might look at what's happening here and say, oh, this B flat kind of shows up out of nowhere. I think I'm going to let that, whoops, I keep forgetting to move the cursor over. I'm going to add another C here so that that C can go to that B flat, goes to that A. And now in this measure, it's also the A that's missing. I had a D, F. The A was missing C. So that was an easy call. Here, now, what I'm really missing in this chord is a D. So I'm going to go here and add the D. And move it down an octave. And then here, I've got what I need, C, E, G. So I'll just add a C. Never hurts to double the root. Here, A, C, E. I have what I need. I think what I'm going to do is just keep the E. Let it be doubled here so that because there's something about this just repeating of this that might be effective, and I can always revisit that. This chord is missing an F sharp. This chord is, well, it's missing the fifth B. Voice leading wise, not sure there's a great way to get there. Worry about that next time. And then this chord is missing also the seventh, as well as the possible flat 9 that I know would sound lovely on a dominant going to a minor chord. But here I'm missing both the third and the fifth. I'm sorry, I'm missing the seventh and the fifth. I've got the root, the third, and that's it. I look at voice leading wise though, C sharp really wants to come down to C. Whoops. Once again, move over. Okay, I want to add the C to that chord. This chord ends up getting everything it needs by the time this arpeggio is done. So I think I'll just pick a note to add. I think it's going to be the D because that seems like it voice leads pretty well. You know, this might be a time to just use the mouse. I never do that. I never, add notes with the mouse. Here, I'll let that D go down to C, even though that creates some doubling there. I've already got my 2 notes here. This guy, I feel like, oh, if I add that C, I have parallel fifths. I could probably live with it, but I'm going to go with E. Here, I think I'm going to go with a D. I think I'm just going to, I'm looking at, I don't want it to get higher than the melody. This already does get higher than the melody. So I think actually I'm going to get rid of that G because that's higher than the melody here, and I'm just going to make this be a triad C right there. And then I'll let this be the D, and then let this be a C, and then another C. All right, so I went through that all pretty quickly, but I talked aloud as I was doing. I was trying to fill out the chord as well as create reasonable voice leading. Let me save it and shrink down the view so we can see it. And now let's go ahead and see what we have. Let's get whole page. I don't really want whole page because that's physically the whole page. And I really just want what I need. So I'll just zoom until it looks good. All right. So let's go ahead and play this guy right now, and then we'll pick it up next week and actually do something other than just have these dotted half notes in the accompaniment. Okay, I gotta stop it. I said I wanted a G here, but I don't want my accompaniment above the melody. So that's all well and good. I can have the B flat that I really wanted. I wanted a B flat, a flat 9, so now I get it. Sorry to interrupt. There's probably another place where I did that. I won't interrupt this time. I'll let it go and fix it later. Nice. So realistically, the only thing, it was only this other G here, where the exact same issue of it was above the melody, and yeah, I could just move it down an octave, but by gosh, I've really been missing that B flat anyhow. So that flat 9. There we go. So again, I'm going to just play it from the beginning so we can hear the whole thing, and then I think I will sign off. Well, there you have it. I'm not going to keep just this chord changing boom, boom in the middle of the measure like that. It'll do something, you know, more interesting with how we arrange this, because that didn't sound great, but it'll sound better once we complete how the arrangement works. So that is how I approach harmonization. And again, next time we'll look more at how I might approach actually arranging this, whether I'm going to arrange it for a vocal like SATB, or if I actually arrange it for piano, or, you know, we'll look at other possibilities maybe if people have suggestions. Hey, well, how about if you do it for guitar or for string quartet or whatever? We'll take a look at some possibilities. See if I have any questions or anything. I've been talking a lot, but there you have it. And that is my reharmonization of Silent Night. That's not exactly the same as the ones I did before, but follows the same principles. This one has just maybe a good balance of simplicity, of only one chord per measure, not involving any really jazz specific things, but just making good use of the circle of fifths and kind of really basic harmonic techniques that really everyone should learn if you really want to get good at this kind of music. So with that said, I will sign off and catch you next week, and we'll take this piece to somewhat of a conclusion. See you then.